All right. I think everything looks like it's working all right. Thanks for joining us for History Chats this afternoon. Yeah, we got an interesting one here. I'm going to throw it over to Gary, and he can take it away and talk about the story of Parcherville.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, today we're carrying on a little bit of what I did a couple of weeks ago and talking about some of the historic neighborhoods, really, of the city of Wausau. So today we're coming up into Parcherville. And let me just refresh you again where Parcherville is on that map of 1912. Parcherville up in the northwest side of Wausau. The boundaries a little bit not so precise, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So again, reviewing the neighborhoods, we have a new one this week. Besides Behind the Creek, which we have already talked about, the Flats, the Hollow, we have something we just came across this week in researching Parcherville. We're now making reference to something called Yankee Town, which have been identified with that part of Wausau pretty much on East Hill. And the reference to Yankee Town is more than once. So we are seeing that being talked about, a quote from Marchetti, but we don't know where he said that. Louis Marchetti referred to Yankee Town. So that's also on our radar with regard to maybe future talks. But today, we're coming up to the northwest part of the city, up into Parcherville. And of course, Parcherville, when we talk about Parcherville, we talk about Robert Parcher. We'll talk a little bit about him soon. But it was Robert Parcher that sort of gave this part of the city its name. He came to Wausau in 1858. He was born in Vermont in 1838. He worked his way up the entrepreneurial ladder in Wausau, a variety of business interests, president of the Wausau Boom Company, invested in the Wausau Lumber Company, First National Bank, died December the 4th, 1909. But one of the more notable parts of his life was when he was mayor of the city of Wausau. And Marchetti in his book said, with the election of Mr. R.E. Parcher as mayor in 1891 and his re-election in 1892 and 93, mayors just had one-year terms back then. There was inaugurated a new era in Wausau, a new municipal policy in Wausau, and he really came forth. We'll talk a little bit about that. Mr. Parcher, when he passed away in 1904, he was really quite honored. Big headlines in the newspaper Robert Parcher's dead. He was a worker for Wausau. I think, as being mayor, is also a business interest. Robert Parcher really doesn't hit the laurels that maybe is deserved of him. He was sort of in the background for a lot of things, but his interest was really in lumber and a variety of other things that really, in the history of Wausau, I don't think we really give him enough credit. So we're going to do that a little bit today. Another headline from the Wausau paper, Robert Parcher as man and citizen. So again, they're referring to him as really a key player in the development of the city. When he was mayor, sidewalks started to come in. He was noted for the development of bridges. These newspaper articles just went on and on with regard to the great citizen that he was, as industrialist as well as mayor of the city of Wausau. So again, well, what brings him with regard to Parcherville and all this? So if we look at a map of 1900, around 1900, just take a look at some of the property that Robert Parcher was developing at that time. So he owned a lot of land up in the northwest part of the city. You can see, Wausau, of course, was not as far north as it is today. But again, within the city of Wausau, he was owning land as well as north of the city of Wausau. And he also owned land on the east side of the city of Wausau. And just that small story with regard to his land on the east side, that was the land that he was eventually given to St. Mary's Catholic, the hospital up on 7th Street. The players in that development of the hospital, Robert Parcher was there, and the one street in the city is right there. We have Parcher Street coming to the north of what was at that time St. Mary's Hospital. So again, a landowner, industrialist. So because of his involvement in some of the land to the northwest of the city, this sort of land became sort of known as Parcherville. So just a little defining of sort of where we are. So on the west side, coming Norton Street, basically a little bit north of Bridge Street, at that time coming north of the city limits, which at that time was Schofield Avenue. Things change, of course, through the years. We'll see some changes happening. But basically from the river west to the city limits, and then to the north to Schofield Avenue, which is Campus Drive today. So again, a little bit of a boundary of what I would classify as Parcherville. So what brought people here? If we come back to this slide, we can see that the streets are already being developed, but there's a lot of empty land. So things are 1900, people are starting to come to the west side. This east side is already being developed. So again, to the west side, what's bringing that population to the west side? So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll start with, of course, the natural thing with regard to what's bringing people to the west side of the factories. The factories are quite important, and especially earlier on 1900 and even before, that was the development up off of Cherry Street, and these two blue spots sort of indicate sort of where the factories are. Notice the rail line is coming in. The rail line is already moving north to cover these manufacturing areas. So we'll talk about that. But one of the more unusual things that sort of happened a little bit later in 1917, a little article in the Wausau paper saying that a new Incorporation has been formed, Wausau Manufacturing Company. The company is headed by Mr. Lyon and will manufacture hardwood toothpicks at the new plant to be erected on the site of the concrete block and supply company on Cherry Street. So this address was 1101 to 1121 Cherry Street for this new toothpick factory. We don't think of that very often, that this was really a hot item in the city of Wausau, but it was. Toothpicks, $5 a box, made at Wausau Toothpick Factory at sale at Weekman Hart. This is 1918. It didn't take long, and they were manufacturing toothpicks. And by 1922, within a few years, they were making billions of toothpicks. Annual output of the Wausau manufacturing is beyond belief. Human hands never touch toothpicks until they reach the consumer. Again, a little manufacturing concern, bringing people to the west side. This is a little article later on, 1939, toothpicks used throughout the world, made in Wausau. Sort of, again, one of those manufacturing concerns that put Wausau on the map. Factory opened here in 1917, capable of turning out millions. Again, the article talks about the development of this toothpick factory. So again, one of the more interesting manufacturing concerns coming into existence on the west side. We're going to move a little bit north to that blue area up on Randolph Street, because that would be what would come to be the Wausau Box and Lumber Company. Notice Randolph Street. They were making boxes. This was owned by the Schofield. A little bit of history. This was owned by the Schofield family at that time. When Burks and Ross came into Schofield and built their large sawmill on the Eau Claire River in Schofield, the Schofields moved their plant up into this area of the city of Wausau on the northwest side. They were pretty much making boxes and a variety of other wood products up in this plant up on Randolph Street in the city. Notice a couple things to make note of. One is the Wisconsin River showing up on the lower right-hand side of the map, as well as they're calling it a small creek. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but notice the creek flowing through this area also. But in the history of this spot would also mean that the movement of other companies into this northwest side. The story of Marathon Electric, for instance, starts on the riverfront, on the riverside south of the public library in downtown Wausau with this plant. This is where they started, along the riverfront. But then they moved to their facility, which we now know up on Randolph Street, up on the northwest side. Marathon Electric again has gone through a new owner, I understand. But in the meantime, this plant employed hundreds of people as it continued to grow throughout the 1900s. You notice that the neighborhood is not very populated at this time. We start to see the growth of the city of Wausau on the northwest side. Marathon Electric here was one of the key ingredients in providing for the growth of the northwest side, and as of course we would continue to grow further north and further west from Marathon Electric, providing a lot of jobs for the workers in the neighborhood. And Marathon Electric was there up on Randolph Street. Just a map, hugging the Wisconsin River on the northwest side of the river, northwest side of the city. Again, another plant as another picture showing you the continual growth of the neighborhood. Just for a little further reference, future reference, notice on the lower side we start to see a baseball diamond, which we will soon come to see as Schofield Park. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But again, the importance of Marathon Electric and that plant was very important for the growth of this part of the city of Wausau. So another important part of any kind of a neighborhood would be its schools, because when people start to come, the city of Wausau would feel a need to provide schools for the young children in the neighborhood. So back in the day, around 1900 or thereabouts, this school started earlier, but the first school in the neighborhood was Columbia School. And you, in the Columbia edition, and you don't take the word of the map at that time. We did change the city, some of the names of the streets in the city, but the Columbia School was up off of, I think that would have been first, for what would eventually come to be First Avenue. A picture of Schofield, two-story. Basically, it was elementary school, maybe a few high school students, but basically an elementary school on the Wausau's west side. I always like these pictures because they always give you a good little sense of what the population of the school was like, how many students were there. Who knows when this picture was taken? Let's see, maybe it is on the bottom. But this is the Columbia School serving the kids and the population of the Northwest Side for many years. But then in 1921, the Wausau School District closed this school and sent all the children to the new Grant School, which was being built, again, as we know it today on Bridge Street, so that the new Grant School was going to be covering all the children to the north of Bridge Street for sure, and as well into the neighborhood. So the Columbia School now is being, the Columbia students are now being transferred to the new Grant School. But that wasn't. But as the population started to grow in the Northwest Side, for instance, 1955, they were referring to the new Parcherville School. Again, referring to the area, this neighborhood, however you want to refer to this Northwest Side, they're just saying they're giving anything in this area the name of Parcherville. So here's the Parcherville School. They're calling, for a new school. But then some of the parents were saying, well, let's call it something else. Pointing out that the school is not even in the old Parcherville area. Well, they still were calling it the Parcherville School. But of course that changed eventually. I'm sorry for the quality of the picture, but this is the Parcherville School taking shape. Of course, we know what that school is today, but again, they were calling it the Parcherville School well into construction. But then, of course, in 1956, the new elementary school in the Parcherville area will be named for Thomas Jefferson. So the school board changed the name from Parcherville School to the Jefferson School, which we know today on Randolph. It's up on Randolph, Northwest Side, serving the children of the Northwest Side for many years and continuing to this very day. This is a picture of it as today, just a little bit over. But again, as the population grew from into the northwest side, the need for a new school, and Thomas Jefferson was it. So, well, we need a park. So, with all the people up in that neighborhood, we needed a park. So, this is a scene. You can notice Marathon Electric to the lower left, and then you see a baseball diamond. In fact, you see two baseball diamonds, which was Schofield Park. So again, so now with the growth of the neighborhood, you can see if you go into this neighborhood today, it's a little bit more built up, but it was started to be built up specifically after World War II, when Marathon Electric was really going very well. But this is the Schofield Park. Remember that I said that at one time this area of the manufacturing of the old box company was owned by the Schofields. They gave this land to the city for a park. And that is tucked at the end of Randolph Street along the riverfront. This is the way it looks today. There's a boat landing, as well as some ball fields, as well as a great green space serving the neighborhood here in Parcherville for many years. So again, when I was here, a lot of people using it, a boat launch, a great drive down to the riverfront for launching your boat. So a great park here in the city. Also notice that there's an L in the Schofield name. Usually we only see this in reference to the family name of Schofield. So the city of Schofield dropped the L, and that's just, but that's just a little bit of trivia. So I conclude with a map of a creek, Boss Creek. You know, when I talked about Stinchville Creek, a couple of weeks ago, I felt, well, you know, but now I see that perhaps Boss Creek defined the northern limits of Parcherville, because that sort of came into this, defines it in a way. It starts at the river well, it doesn't start at the riverfront, it ends at the riverfront, but it starts to the west and comes through the community of Parcherville, and it ends there by what it ends in Schofield Park. So I don't know of a history of Boss Creek like I do of Stinchville Creek, but it's there, and it's sort of defining the Parcherville area. So with that, just a little bit of a brief history of Parcherville, kind of a unique history. When we refer to Parcherville today, people don't really quite get what we're talking about, because it's sort of an unused term for that northwest side of the city. But just recently, newspaper articles, the community was still referring to this as Parcherville, as that part of the community, that northwest part of the community. A great history of manufacturing, parks, schools, working class people, but working at the local factories. A great little history, and I hope you learned a little bit about Parcherville today as that part of the history of the city of Wausau. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ben.
Yeah, awesome. I know I learned a little bit about Parcherville, even being, you know, a so-called historian of Marathon County and living in Wausau. You know, didn't know. Very cool. I'm just going to, I think we'll wrap it up here, but I wanted to just let you know, next week, We're going to continue this theme and we're going to look at another community. I don't know if we call Parcherville a community or a neighborhood. It kind of is in between there, but we're going to go out to the far west side of Marathon County and look at Colby, which is, I'm pretty sure the second city of both, the second city incorporated in both Marathon County and Clark County, which is interesting as a city that exists in both places. I could be wrong about that. I've done some preliminary, but I think that the data all kind of works out there. Very interesting story, regardless, and I'm looking forward to delving into that and sharing some of the history with you. Yeah. Well, thanks for watching. I think that's pretty much what we normally end with. So, yeah, if you're still watching, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next time for